I have this issue where when I hear that you should be spending 10% of your budget on sales and marketing, I think, oh, this is marketing 101. This is old school thinking. And then we have someone who comes to us that is spending 3% of their overall budget on sales and marketing. And they're doing well, but they're coming to us for a reason. And then you've got the other end of the spectrum where you've got like a startup that's spending 10%, but their budget's so small and they need to be spending 30%. It's like, how do people come to us and they're like, are we spending too much? Are we spending too little? What should we be spending on marketing, advertising, sales and marketing as a whole? What is your take on that?
Yeah. I've come face to face with this. A couple months ago, I was at happy hour with one of our friends who's a business owner here in Philadelphia, a very successful business. And I mentioned that to him, that I thought, how much of your budget are you spending on sales and marketing? From my perspective, 10% is like a decent baseline to be thinking about. And he almost fell off his bar stool and he kind of yelled at me. He said, you can't go telling people that you think that. You sound insane. I've thought back on that conversation so many times, like, am I insane? Does that sound insane? What's it about his business or how he's thinking about his business that makes that sound so insane? But yeah, I mean, if you're not spending some of your resources to generate new business and opportunities, then how are you going to grow, right? And that's not to say that you need to spend 10% of your budget on advertising. When we say sales and marketing, we're talking about your sales team salaries, right? We're talking about potentially your website, maintaining, building on it, your content strategy, and all of these different pieces. But if you're not investing in that aspect of your business, then how do you expect to grow? I saw a report a few months ago of an analysis of home services businesses. It was a certain segment of home services businesses. I want to say HVAC. And I think it said that the average spend for customer acquisition, sales and marketing, and that whole thing, and that amongst the companies that they had audited was 15%. We know that, the big luxury brand houses, right? The big, Gucci's of the world and things like that, the LVMHs, they'll spend upwards of 30% of their budget on marketing because that's part of what justifies the price of their products, right? So it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all answer there. I always kind of start with 10% as a proxy baseline, but I'm also not going to say that there's not businesses and industries and places where less than that is the right answer. But if you're significantly less than that and you're wondering why you're not growing and why you're not getting more opportunities in the door, then that's certainly a place to look. Am I taking this seriously? Am I allocating the resources necessary to make sure that I am generating those opportunities? And a lot of times, I think not.
Yeah, I think it comes back to this problem with understanding the economics of your business. And a lot of times when we're throwing around numbers, maybe a company's not used to spending much on paid advertising. But when we look at them and say, what's your allowable cost, CAC, cost to acquire a customer? What are you willing to spend to acquire that customer? And they look at us kind of weird. And if we throw out a number, sometimes we get like oh, hell no. $1,000? No, I was thinking like 200. But when you really break it down, their lifetime revenue on that customer is like 25,000, say. And we're looking at it and saying, I would spend, look, I'm not the business owner over here, but I'd spend $4,000 to get scale and to be acquiring customers at a better pace to drive the margin that you have. So you're under investing. And it all comes down to this math equation, I feel like, which we help clients through a lot of the time, is like understanding that it's not always bad to spend more to acquire a customer if the math makes sense. And I think that should inform the number, the percentage, to a degree.
Sure. You're talking about kind of the unit economics of a customer, right? How much revenue do I generate off of a new relationship, both in the first transaction and then also in the lifetime of that customer relationship, right? Now, how much does it cost my business to deliver on that promise to them, to deliver the work that they're paying me for? What percentage of the revenue is that? Is it 60%? Is it 50%? That's something to really make sure that you understand about your business. And then you kind of know what the differential is there. And that differential goes into your general administrative stuff, right? The cost of your office and things like that. But then there's a section of that should be going to your sales and marketing. Here's what I am going to allow myself to spend to generate a new opportunity or customer relationship. And certainly there needs to be a chunk in there for profit as well. But if you're taking the entire acquisition sort of allocation of a customer as your profit, then you're limiting the growth and the number of opportunities that you're going to get. And there's going to be a balance point there somewhere where you're actually going to make more money in the long run if you allocate that percentage of, the revenue generated for a customer to generating more customers.
And that's the whole conversation, growth versus profitability,
right?
Having a balance there.
Right. I mean, that's why you see a lot of, particularly we saw this recently in SaaS businesses, but that's why you would see a lot of high growth businesses being willing to run at a huge loss, right? Because if you've calculated the 5-year customer value of every customer you acquire to be some significant amount of money, then why wouldn't you spend 5 times the amount of money acquiring them this year right now to the point where you run at a significant loss, right? Because over the next 5 years, you're going to generate that revenue from them over the long run anyway. That's because those companies are doing that calculation. They have a really good understanding of revenue generated, future profits, and the acquisition cost. And they can think in that way that says, hey, if I borrow $1 million now and spend it to get those customers now, it's going to generate $5 million over the next 5 years. So why wouldn't I kind of make that bet?
Yeah. We went through this. We saw it ourselves. We were spending probably 5% of our budget on sales and marketing for years. And we said, we got to stop this. We got to treat ourselves like a client. And we got that up to 10, 11, 12%, depending on the year, and immediately saw the impact. I mean, and we are consistently calculating the return on that investment. And lifetime, it's like 6x on that increase.
But it takes several years to get there.
Yeah. You have to kind of have a belief that you can get there, and that it's worth investing more, and that you will be empowered by that increase in investment. And I think not everyone believes that or has felt that before. So it's hard to sometimes convince someone who has not been down that road.